When Caitlin Clark turned down $1 million salary offer, the reaction was swift and stunned, but it shouldn't have been. The money was historic, but the message was clear. The offer wasn't nearly enough to match the value players bring to a league now riding high on billion-dollar deals and surging popularity. Alongside stars like those founding the unrivaled league, Clark's refusal signaled more than personal ambition. It was a collective declaration that players understand their worth. They're not waiting.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Or empty promises. They're forcing a confrontation over revenue sharing, brand ownership, and leadership that respects the modern athlete. For Engelbert, that refusal became a referendum on her tenure, and it cost her the job. The players didn't just reject the offer, they rejected the entire model behind it. In their eyes, the league's leadership had misread the room, focusing on flashy numbers while ignoring deeper structural inequities. Engelbert's resignation lays bare a leadership team that couldn't keep pace with the movement it was trying to control. This isn't about rebellion. It's about clarity. The era of underpaid, underrepresented women athletes is over, and the institutions that can adapt will fall behind. The league's next chapter will be written by those who see players not as employees, but as partners in the game's future. The WNBA is unraveling, and it's happening faster than anyone expected. Caitlin Clark, the league's most bankable star, just refused to sign the collective bargaining agreement. And she wasn't alone. Other major players backed her up, turning what should have been a headline about historic salaries into a full-blown leadership crisis. The league thought it could lock in loyalty with $1 million offer. Instead, it triggered a rebellion. And now, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert is out, resigned, reportedly under pressure. Whether she jumped or was pushed doesn't really matter. The damage is done. Her resignation marks a seismic shift in power and exposes how disconnected league management has become from its players. This wasn't about one offer. This was about years of underappreciation boiling over. The league has been busy boasting about its $2 billion media rights deal. That's a monumental number for any sports league, especially one that's historically been underfunded and overlooked. But when the players looked at that figure, they didn't see celebration. They saw a gap, a massive one, a multi-billion-dollar deal followed by a salary offer that, while record-breaking on paper, still didn't reflect their value. The players didn't just want more money. They wanted a share of the pie they helped bake. Ticket sales, merchandise, advertising, endorsements, all driven by their performance, their visibility, their voices. Yet the league's proposal offered little to no revenue sharing. And that's where everything fell apart. Caitlin Clark's rejection wasn't just personal. It was strategic. She's the biggest name in women's basketball right now. She's brought record-breaking viewership, packed arenas, and attention the league hasn't seen in decades. She could have taken a check and kept it moving. But she didn't. She saw that accepting this deal would mean locking in a system that still doesn't value the players at the level they deserve. So she said no. And her saying no gave everyone else permission to do the same. That's when the WNBA's leadership realized they weren't negotiating from a place of power anymore. The players were. Engelbert's sudden resignation wasn't just bad timing. It was symbolic. It confirmed what the players already knew. The current leadership can't handle this new era. This is an era of athlete empowerment, of transparency, of athletes owning their brand, their labor, their futures. Engelbert, for all her corporate background and financial acumen, never quite managed to evolve with that shift. And now, the league is paying for it. What's worse is that this wasn't a surprise. The signs were there. Over the last few seasons, the players have raised red flag after red flag. Complaints about poor travel arrangements, lack of investment in marketing, public mishandling of online harassment, and the constant need to play overseas just to supplement their incomes. The trust between players and management has been fraying for years. The failed CBA deal just ripped it open. And right when the league should have been celebrating its growth, it's staring down the barrel of a lockout. Negotiations are stalled. Morale is shot. And with no commissioner and no signed agreement, the 2026 season is suddenly at risk of being canceled entirely. That's not just a scheduling issue. That's an existential threat. Because here's the part the WNBA didn't seem to calculate correctly. Players now have alternatives. Real ones. The unrivaled league, founded by some of the most respected and recognizable players in the game, is gaining steam. It offers something the WNBA hasn't: player ownership, equity, creative freedom, and a true partnership model. It's not about being a better league on paper. It's about being built differently from the start. That scares the WNBA, and it should. For years, the league functioned like the only option. If you wanted to play professionally in the U.S., this was it. But the rise of unrivaled changes that dynamic completely. Players aren't trapped anymore. They can walk, and some of them already are. This isn't a hypothetical. It's a very real, very immediate disruption to the WNBA's grip on women's basketball in the U.S. And it was completely avoidable. The players have been loud, clear, consistent. They've been asking for a seat at the table, one that reflects the revenue they're generating, the fandom they've built, and the risks they've taken to grow the game. What they've received instead are top-down solutions, PR-friendly initiatives, and most recently, a deal that still fails to acknowledge their economic power. And the narrative that players are being unreasonable, it's not landing anymore. Fans are smarter. The media landscape has shifted. Audiences now understand that the people making the product are the product, and they deserve compensation that reflects that. Calling it greed doesn't work when you're watching billion-dollar deals get signed on the backs of athletes who are still fighting for a fair cut. This cultural shift, where players know their worth and demand it, isn't going away. It's accelerating. The WNBA can either meet that moment or be replaced by something that will. That's the choice now. There's no middle ground left. The old model of modest salaries, minimal investment, and maximum control is broken. The players know it. The fans know it. And now, after Engelbert's resignation, the league is finally being forced to confront it. But time is running out. With every day that passes without a new commissioner, without a new deal, and without real structural change, the risk of losing the 2026 season increases. And if that happens, the league may not recover. Not just because of the missed games, but because of what it signals, that the WNBA couldn't evolve fast enough to keep up with the very stars it helped create. That would be the ultimate irony. A league built to elevate women's basketball becoming the thing that holds it back. There's still a chance to fix this, but only if the league leadership stops treating the players like employees and starts treating them like partners. Only if they acknowledge that the people driving the league forward deserve to benefit directly from its success. And only if they understand that leadership in 2025 doesn't look like corporate detachment. It looks like collaboration, shared power, transparency. Without that shift, this isn't just a PR problem. It's the beginning of the end. So where do you stand on this? Do you think the players made the right call, rejecting the deal? Should the WNBA embrace revenue sharing? Or will it risk losing its top stars to new leagues? Would a canceled 2026 season be the breaking point? Or is this the shake-up the league needed all along? Drop your take in the comments. Hit like if you're following this drama unfold in real time. And subscribe if you want to stay plugged into every power move, player stand, and leadership meltdown ahead. Because if this is what the WNBA's future looks like, we're all going to need front row seats. Let's be real. This isn't just the biggest shakeup in WNBA history. This is a make-or-break moment for the entire league. With Kathy Engelbert gone and the players flat out rejecting the CBA, the WNBA has officially lost control of the narrative. The era of top-down decision-making, where league officials handed out contracts and expected silence, is over. Done. That power dynamic has flipped, and now the players are running the conversation. It's not subtle anymore. This is a mutiny. And what's wild is that the league saw it coming and still did nothing to stop it. For years, players have been sounding the alarm. Publicly, clearly, and honestly, patiently. They've spoken out about the poor pay, the inadequate travel conditions, the lopsided revenue structures. They've explained over and over again that they're not just employees, They're the reason the league is growing. And the response from the top? A pat on the head and a one-time salary bump. The WNBA called it historic. The players called it insufficient. Why? Because they know the value of the product. They're the product. Look at the numbers. The league is celebrating media rights deals that cross the $2 billion mark. That's not growth. That's an explosion. We're talking about money pouring in from every direction. Television, streaming, licensing, advertising. And yet, when it comes time to share the profits, the players are still being offered flat salaries with no stake in the upside. That's not a partnership. That's a performance bonus dressed up as progress. And players like Caitlin Clark? They're not having it. She may be new to the league, but her refusal to sign that deal wasn't about inexperience. It was a calculated, informed decision. Because Clark knows something the WNBA wasn't ready for. She doesn't need them as much as they need her. Let's say that again for the people in the back. Caitlin Clark doesn't need the WNBA, but the WNBA desperately needs Caitlin Clark. She's not just the most watched college player in recent memory. She's a ratings machine, a marketing dream, and a walking brand. She brought record-shattering viewership to women's basketball before she even signed a pro contract. She's moved tickets, sold merch, and dragged massive audiences with her wherever she goes. She is the cultural moment, and she knows it. So when she leads the rejection of a CBA that doesn't include revenue sharing or meaningful player equity, it sends shockwaves. Because if the WNBA can't get its most valuable player to buy in, that's a failure of leadership, full stop. And that failure just cost Kathy Engelbert her job. Let's talk about that, because Engelbert's exit wasn't just another executive reshuffle. It was a resignation under pressure, plain and simple. And while the league hasn't said it outright, we all know the deal. She couldn't hold the ship together, couldn't manage the shift in power, couldn't pivot fast enough in a world where athletes now expect more than applause. They expect ownership. Engelbert came in with a business background. She was supposed to bring structure, stability, corporate polish. But she didn't bring vision. And when the players stopped cooperating, the cracks started to show. This was never just about one contract negotiation. It was about a leadership style completely misaligned with what modern athletes want. The kind of leadership that still treats players like assets instead of partners. That still views athlete activism and empowerment as a problem instead of the future. The WNBA's biggest mistake? Thinking it could ride the wave of growth without changing its internal systems. Because growth changes expectations. Growth changes dynamics. Growth demands that everyone benefiting from the rise contributes to the success. Not just the players putting their bodies on the line, but the executives in the suites, too. And right now, that's the piece that's missing. The league was happy to let players carry the visibility, the marketing, the engagement, but didn't want to cut them in on the back end. And now the players are saying, not anymore. And while the WNBA is trying to figure out how to recover, there's something even more disruptive lurking in the background. Unrivaled. Let's be clear, this isn't a gimmick. It's not a vanity project. It's a serious, player-founded alternative. And it's making the WNBA nervous for good reason. Unrivaled is offering more than a paycheck. It's offering equity, ownership, creative control, the very things the WNBA has refused to give its athletes for decades. And that threat is very real, because if even a handful of top-tier stars jump ship, the WNBA's house of cards collapses. Fans follow players. Brands follow players. Media follows players. If Caitlin Clark, Breanna Stewart, Aya Wilson, and other major names decide to make Unrivaled their new home, that's game over. The WNBA becomes the second option overnight. And we're already on that path. Let's not forget, the players have leverage. They don't need to play 36 games a year under a rigid schedule for a league that only recently started flying them charter. They can build their own platform, their own brand, their own league, backed by VC money and social media influence. The tools are all there. The audience is ready. So the question now is, does the WNBA even understand the moment it's in? Because this isn't a crossroads. This is the edge of a cliff. The league is facing a potential lockout, an identity crisis, and now a leadership vacuum. And what's their next move? Because time is not on their side. They need a new commissioner. Someone bold. Someone who doesn't just understand business, but understands athletes. Someone who sees this moment not as a threat, but as a reset, as a chance to finally restructure the league in a way that centers the players who built it. If that doesn't happen, and fast, we may not see a 2026 season at all. Think about that. After all the progress, the hype, the media attention, women's basketball could lose an entire season because the league refused to modernize its business model. That's not just bad for the sport. That's embarrassing. And more importantly, it's a betrayal. A betrayal of the players, the fans, and the culture that's kept the league alive through years of underinvestment and neglect. The WNBA had its chance to be the leader in women's sports. But now, it risks becoming the cautionary tale. And we'll ask it plainly. How does the WNBA expect to survive when its stars are already building the exit? The old way is collapsing. Fast. And unless the league embraces radical transparency, shared power, and genuine investment in its athletes, there's no future here. Let's keep going, because this story isn't done. It's not even close. Right now, the WNBA is spinning. No commissioner, no collective bargaining agreement, no trust from the very players who are the product. The league is frozen in place, and it's being forced to watch as its future potentially walks right out the door. Not with a bang, not with a boycott, just with players saying, "We're not doing this anymore." And that's the part the league still doesn't seem to get. This is not about players being difficult or greedy or asking for something unreasonable. It's about basic value. It's about fairness. It's about athletes looking at the money being made off their names, their highlights, their moments, and realizing they're getting a tiny sliver of the return. A $1 million salary sounds flashy until you realize the league just inked over $2 billion in media rights deals. Where is that money going? Because it's not going into charter travel. It's not showing up in player bonuses. It's certainly not being handed out in the form of revenue sharing. So when the league came to the table with a CBA that offered a raise but kept all the power, the players didn't hesitate. They said no. And in that no was years of frustration. Years of being told, be patient. Years of being marketed as trailblazers and icons, while being treated like second-tier employees behind the scenes. The truth is, the players have always known their value. It's just that now, finally, they have the power to act on it. Caitlin Clark's refusal wasn't a diva move. It was a signal that the biggest name in the sport, the most marketable player of this generation, is not playing along anymore. And if she's not, why should anyone else? That's the domino that sent Engelbert packing. Once Clark said no, and others followed, Engelbert's entire negotiation strategy collapsed. And without a plan B, she didn't have much of a seat to stay in. Her resignation, likely under pressure, speaks volumes. Because it wasn't just about the failed deal. It was about a leadership style that couldn't keep up, about being out of sync with where women's sports are headed. Engelbert had corporate experience. What she didn't have was the ability, or maybe the willingness, to build a league with the players, not just for them. And now, it's not just her job on the line. It's the future of the WNBA. Let's not sugarcoat this. A canceled 2026 season is a very real possibility. That's not fear-mongering. That's where we're headed if this standoff continues. If new leadership doesn't step in immediately with a new tone, new structure, and a new understanding of what these players are demanding, the league might not make it. The players have the leverage. The audience is on their side. And if push comes to shove, they have another league waiting, one they're building themselves. Unrivaled is not a side hustle. It's not a passion project. It's a calculated, strategic backup plan, one that's gaining legitimacy by the day. The founding players saw the writing on the wall a long time ago. They saw how slow the WNBA was to evolve, how reluctant it was to relinquish power, and they decided to create something that actually reflects where women's sports is going. And here's the kicker. The WNBA helped create this. Through years of ignoring player voices, downplaying their concerns, and acting like they were lucky to even have a league, they pushed their talent to look elsewhere. Unrivaled is the response. And it's working. If even 10 of the league's biggest names walk away and commit to unrivaled full-time, the balance shifts completely. The WNBA becomes the other league, the backup option. And once that narrative sets in, it's almost impossible to recover. The players know that. The league knows that. And the fans? They're not clueless either. What's different now is that the public sees through the corporate spin. No one's buying the story that these players are spoiled or asking for too much. Not when they're selling out arenas, breaking viewership records, and being the literal face of billion-dollar brand deals. This isn't entitlement. This is earned power. And now that players know what they're worth, there's no unknowing it. There's no stuffing that back in a box. They've realized they don't have to stay in a system that's barely catching up to their momentum. And that puts the WNBA in a pressure cooker. So what's the move? Because slapping together a new commissioner and throwing a few more dollars at the next offer won't fix this. What's needed is a structural overhaul, a recognition that players are not just part of the business. They are the business. That means revenue sharing. That means decision-making seats at the table. That means ownership, period. If the league isn't willing to offer that, they better be ready to get left behind. The ball is in the league's court. But if they fumble this, if they delay, or worse, dismiss what the players are demanding, 2026 isn't just in danger. The entire league's relevance could vanish overnight. It's because sports fans follow stars. They don't care about brands. They care about people. And if those people walk, so does the audience. That's what the WNBA needs to understand. Anymore, you don't control the narrative just because you're the biggest name in town. You don't get to offer a shiny salary and expect silence. Not when your athletes have platforms, influence, leverage, alternatives. Not when they've already shown you they're ready to bet on themselves. So here we are, one commissioner down, one CBA rejected, one league on the brink, and an entire generation of players saying, we're done waiting. The next few months will determine everything. Will the league finally offer real partnership? Will a new leader come in with the courage to change everything? Or will the WNBA double down, play hardball, and watch its top stars drift away to a league that understands the assignment? The clock is ticking. And if the WNBA isn't careful, the 2026 season won't just be lost. It'll be the year we all look back and say, that's when the league gave it all away. So what do you think? Should the league finally offer revenue sharing? Is Unrivaled going to flip the entire women's basketball ecosystem? Or can the WNBA pull off a last-minute save? Hit that like button if you're keeping score, drop a comment with your take on how this all ends, and subscribe if you want to stay ahead of the next major sports shakeup. Because when history looks back on this moment, it won't be about a contract. It'll be about the power shift that changed everything.